right. I'm last. I'm at the end of the day. You guys are tired. It's been a long day, and there's food and drink to follow. So luckily, I talk fast, so it should be over quickly. As you know, I'm the New Zealand ambassador for an organization called Singularity University, which is headquartered in Silicon Valley. It's headquartered at the NASA Ames Research Center in Mountain View, and it was founded by these two guys. And these guys are really kind of titans of the tech world. So the guy on the right is Peter Diamandis. He started X Prize Foundation, which does large cash prizes for extremely ambitious but extremely well-bounded engineering challenges. He started the International Space University. He started 20 or 30 companies. He's written several books, most of them bestsellers. The guy on the left is the really interesting one. His name's Ray Kurzweil, and he invented, like, everything. He invented flatbed scanners, he invented optical character recognition, he invented text-to-speech for blind people, he invented the Kurzweil synthesizer, he's got 21 honorary doctorates, he's received honors from 3 US presidents, and most interesting to the conversation we're about to have is that they've gone back and looked at the predictions he's made about where technology is going for the past 20 years, and they found that he has an 86% accuracy rate. If you think about the kind of massive technological change we've seen over the past 20 years or so, that's a really astonishing feat. He predicted, for example, that by 1998, a computer would beat a human at chess. And of course, IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess in 1997 to that level of specificity. And so when Ray Kurzweil says something about where technology is going, it's generally worth paying attention to. So I first got involved with Singularity University, SU, we call it. Now you guys are in the know. I got involved with them just under 2 years ago. I attended their executive program, which is a 6-day program at NASA. And I came away with 3 really core insights that are kind of the substance of what I want to share with you today. And the insights start with this guy. So this is Gordon Moore. He's one of the co-founders of Intel Corporation. And in 1965, he made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling every 18 to 24 months or so, as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we could see. This became known as Moore's Law. You might have heard of it. So the first insight that comes out of SU comes from Ray Kurzweil, who zoomed out on Moore's Law. And he said, actually, if instead of looking at the number of transistors on an integrated circuit, we look instead at what we call the price performance of computing. How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000? Turns out that number has been doubling for over 100 years. Starting way back with the beginning of computing with electromechanical punch cards, and then moving on to relays, and then vacuum tubes, and then transistors, and then integrated circuits. Moore's Law is actually the 5th iteration of this underlying accelerated paradigm. Here's another way to think about it. Today, for $1,000, you can buy roughly the number of instructions per second that a mouse brain can process. But according to Kurzweil, by about 2023, for $1,000, you'll be able to buy the number of instructions per second that a human brain can process. And by 2049, for $1,000, you'll be able to buy the number of instructions per second of all human brains on the planet combined. This doubling curve explains why you today, via the smartphone in your pocket, have access to more information than Bill Clinton had the entire time that he was president of the United States. I reckon that's why he looks kind of pissed off in this picture. He's like, wish I had an iPhone when I was in office. Although I'm sure he's really glad Instagram was not a thing when he was around. So the second insight that comes out of SU is that that doubling curve, that accelerating trend, doesn't just apply to computing. It applies to any information-enabled technology. Think about something like photography. Photography used to be substrate-enabled. It was dependent on the physical film for you to do the thing. And then it became information-enabled, dependent instead on ones and zeros. And once that happened, it started to follow a similar doubling in price performance. And today, you can buy a smartphone with a 41-megapixel camera on it, and we don't really think that's that crazy. That's like $1 billion worth of technology in a smartphone. So some of the technology that we're seeing accelerating, computing, obviously the basic one, but also artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, medicine, neuroscience, energy, all following similar doubling trends. And doubling curves have a few really interesting characteristics that make them kind of imperative to pay attention to. The first is that they look flat for a really long time. And you'll know this if you ever tried to do that trick where you fold a piece of paper in half 8 times, right? First fold is easy, second fold is easy, third fold is easy, fourth fold is easy, 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 easy. You're like, this trick is so easy, why am I even doing it? It's so dumb. And it's not until you hit that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper that things start to get really crazy. The second characteristic is that our brains are totally not wired for it. We evolved on the savannah chasing prey and running from predators that behaved in predictable, linear fashions. We did not evolve to project exponentially. And so as a result, the experts continue to predict linear no matter how much evidence we have to the contrary. Gordon Moore himself twice said that Moore's law was over. Both times proven wrong. Like, the guy who invented the law can't get his own law right. So I don't know what hope the rest of us have. But the difference between something following a linear trajectory and something following a doubling curve is insane. 30 linear steps, and you're at the drinks. Don't go now. 30 doubling steps, and you're 26 times around the planet. And the really tricky thing there is that you're not halfway until the 29th step. So it's really hard to track how you're going, how you're progressing. There's another way to think about it. That white line is traditional linear business growth held aloft by what we call sustaining innovations, right? Your car goes from having a cassette player to a CD player to a 6 CD changer, right? It's like kind of doing the same thing it's always done, but a bit better through technology. That red curve is a doubling curve, looking flat for a really long time, hanging out in what we call the trough of disillusionment, disappointment, and deception. And then what happens? It hits that inflection point, that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper, and it goes from deception into chaos and amazement overnight. And all of the incumbents say, it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. Here's an example of this in action. Quick show of hands. How many people think, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Google's self-driving car program, self-driving cars generally. How many people in this room think that self-driving cars are going to be a thing in the hands of consumers within 10 years? Show of hands, 10 years. Okay, 5 years? Keep hands up, 5 years? 2 years? Okay, sweet. This is the Tesla Model S. Elon Musk and his team have sold well over 100,000 of these. They've taken over 400,000 pre-orders for the Model 3. Last October, a year ago, they released a push update to the Model S. That means overnight, these cars were upgraded while their owners slept. You didn't have to do anything to get it, giving these cars autopilot functionality. Every single new Tesla being built today comes with level 5 autonomy. And this is a guy asleep at the wheel while his Tesla drives down the road. I don't know if you can see his head. He's going like that. Does this look scary to you? Yes? I can understand how this would look scary to you. This doesn't look scary to me, because the robot's driving that car. The thing that scares me is the guy who's taking the video. Like, that guy should be watching the road. So the other thing that's happening is that these technologies are not only accelerating, but they are also starting to converge. This is the third key insight. So now we have to consider what happens when an exponential progression in something like artificial intelligence converges with an exponential progression in robotics or big data. What happens when an exponential progression in biotechnology or bioengineering converges with an exponential progression in 3D printing at the atomic scale? And of course, what happens is that things accelerate even faster. What does all of this mean? Pretty much everything you've seen in science fiction is not only possible, but plausible, and probably already here. Here's a good example of this. Does any fans in the room, anybody know what this is? Yes, that's the Star Trek medical tricorder. So on Star Trek, you go down to some alien planet, you come back with some alien bug, you go to the sick bay, they have a handheld device, they run it up and down you, they can tell you what's wrong with you and largely fix you with it. This is what it looks like in real life. This is the Scanadu. It's part of a $10 million tricorder X Prize for the first handheld device that can beat the diagnosis of 7 out of 10 board-certified physicians across a range of 12 ailments. They started this competition with over 300 teams. They're down to the final 7. They're doing clinical trials now. The winner will be announced in January. The Star Trek Medical Tricorder is a thing. It is now available. What does all of this add up to? Huge opportunity. You've heard a lot about the opportunities today afforded by technology. Also a not insignificant amount of terror. Current projections are anywhere from 47 to 81% of jobs as we currently understand them under threat from technology within 20 years. Now, I don't say this to fearmonger, right? We've got 200 years of headlines saying the robots are going to eat all our jobs, and every time the new technologies have created more jobs than they've done away with, right? Combine harvesters, what are the farmers going to do? They're all going to go out of business. That being said, we've never been here at this speed and at this scale, and we need to be paying really close attention. This is a headline from about 2 months ago. The Apple factory Foxconn in China cut 60,000 jobs and replaced them with robots. This is a horrible story. I don't in any way want to diminish or dismiss the impact of this on those 60,000 people and their families. I will say that for those of us in the Western world, this is a narrative we are familiar with. We've heard this before, right? Factory workers replaced by automation. We understand that plot line. A little bit less this one. Artificially intelligent lawyer hired by its first law firm. Or this one. Artificially intelligent chatbot successfully contests 160,000 parking tickets in New York and London. This is a free service created by a 19-year-old. Or this one. Artificially intelligent teaching assistant helps students online for an entire semester, and nobody notices. And the reason this is happening is because the cognitive abilities of artificial intelligence are now getting so good and are now starting to accelerate so much that they are encroaching on areas that have typically been the exclusive domain of humans. Image recognition is a really good example of this. So humans are awesome at image recognition. Computers are historically terrible at it. But recently, the deep learning algorithm has gone from being able to recognize cats, which is awesome, but like 2-year-olds can recognize cats, to being able to recognize numbers, huge leap forward, but 5-year-olds can recognize numbers, to being able to recognize mitosis in cancer cells, which currently requires a trained pathologist, except the computer can do it 1,000 times as fast and 1,000 at a time, and will only ever get better. Every new human pathologist has to start from 0. Every new computer starts with the sum total of all the knowledge of all the previous computers, which is why these things accelerate. Right. I haven't talked at all about agriculture, so I probably should, given this environment. I just want to quickly cover the three main vectors that I see that these technologies are likely to have dramatic disruptive effects in agriculture. So the first is a vector where we're kind of doing the same thing we've already done, but using technology to make it better, smarter, faster, right? We heard a lot about this from Peter. This is self-driving tractor. There's lots of technologies that will make farming better, easier, more effective, more productive. They have robots now that can prune trees and can jump from tree to tree. I think earlier today you heard about an app that can count the number of grapes on a bunch, right? So we're doing the same thing we've done, but just using technology to kind of turbocharge it, right? The second is synthetic animal protein, synthetic meat, synthetic beef, synthetic eggs. And I just want to tell you a really quick story. I might go over by like 1 minute, but I'll run away soon. So when I was at SU, we had this guy get up on stage, Ray McCauley. He's our digital biology guy. And he gets up on stage and he talks to us about bioengineered milk. And they've made this milk, and they've taken yeast, and they've genetically modified it with cow proteins, and it's basically milk. Like, they've brewed it in the lab, and it's milk. It's chemically and genetically identical to milk, but it has not gone through a cow. And they've done this with cow milk, and with human milk, and with narwhal milk. And I watched his talk, and I was like, ew, gross, who would want it? It sounds disgusting. And then late that night, I was having a conversation with Salim Ismail, who's the founding exec director of SU, and we weren't talking about bioengineered milk, we were talking about bioengineered eggs, and I had the same reaction, ew, gross, it sounds disgusting, who would want it? And he was like, Kaila, they don't care about you. They're not targeting you. They're not interested in the vegans, they don't care about the hippies, they don't care about the Whole Foods, which in the US is a pretty big market. They're not after the niche. He's like, they're targeting the industrial caterers who buy eggs by the thousands of kilos. And they need them in powder form, and in liquid form, and in tube form. And they need them to last longer on the shelf, and be 100% salmonella-free, and total certainty of supply. And they need them to brown nicely around the edges and taste more like egg. And they need them to be cheaper. And by every one of those metrics, the bioengineered product wins. And I went, shit, you're right. And actually, maybe it's a good thing that it wins, right? And my head exploded, because that's my whole, everything I understood about the world. Do not underestimate the danger to farming, to meat farmers, of a plant-based hamburger is not that we have a hamburger that vegans will eat. It's that we now have a hamburger that meat eaters will eat. We have hamburgers made from plants that ooze blood, that sizzle, that brown, that char. They are identical to meat burgers, and they don't have any water pollution, and they don't have any methane emissions. They don't have any of those issues, so pay attention to that. And the third is where we have technologies developing in areas that are totally orthogonal to farming, that have a huge impact on farming. LED lighting is a really big one. LED lighting has followed a doubling in price performance. In the past 6 years, it's gone down in price by 90% and doubled in lifespan in that time. And when I heard this, I was like, so what? It's just lights. Like, what does that affect? So I buy better lights, and they last longer. But turns out that LED lighting has a huge impact on indoor farming, which, because LED lighting was so expensive historically, was the exclusive domain of certain high-value crops that I'm sure nobody in this room is growing. But here's what happens. Because of the LED lighting, we now have indoor farms and disused nightclubs in New Jersey that are supplying produce at price parity to New York, price parity with organic produce coming out of California. The world's largest indoor farm in Japan is 100 times more productive per square foot than traditional farming. It uses 40% less energy, generates 80% less food waste, and in Australia and in New Zealand, where I live, this is a really critical one, 99% less water consumption. These are all areas that you guys need to be paying attention to. I'm way over time, 2 minutes, 17 seconds. Thank you so much for paying attention. Enjoy the drinks. Thank you.